Well, I want to start out in the NFL. We're doing a heavy NFL show today on the program, and Sam Yarnell, of course, is here as always. It's election day, by the way. Make sure everybody get out and vote. Sam's going to go do his civic duty a little later on. So we're gonna say goodbye to him a little later on. But Sam's going to do his civic duty today.
It's one of the things
pillars of our
somewhat right. One of the things that makes America somewhat unique, right? And one of the things that a lot of us love about this country is that every few years we do get the right to safely and freely go and cast our opinion whichever way we see fit.
Sure.
And that's pretty cool. Not everyone gets to do that. So go do it.
Off-year elections. We love it. All right, let's talk about the Cowboys and the Cardinals. And the Cowboys, I mean, look, I don't care what the final score says. It really wasn't that close. You never really felt like the Cardinals were in jeopardy in this game because they were moving the ball up and down the field with Jacoby Brissett, who we'll get to in a second. And this Cowboys offense, this juggernaut of an offense, couldn't do anything against the Cardinals for 4 quarters. Deep drives, I mean, they were able to move the ball between the 20s and even in between the 10s in some cases. They moved the football. Yeah. You go and look at the total yardage in this game. They moved the football, but, you know, sometimes it was decision-making, kick a field goal, go for it on 4th down. Brian Schottenheimer thinking he's Dan Campbell, except he doesn't have the Dan Campbell parts. You know, it's like trying to it's like thinking you're driving a Ferrari when you're driving a Volkswagen. That was kind of what was going on there, I think. Sam, I want to start with the Cowboys, and we will get to the Cardinals. I'm not going to spend this whole segment on the Cowboys. But the trade deadline is today, and by the time you watch this show, there will have been trades that have happened. There's already one that's gone on with the Cowboys, making a move for a middle linebacker from the Bengals. Does it really matter? Is there enough moves that they can make today that improve them to the point that they're even going to be a wild card team at this point? And that's the question for me.
No, what? No, this team is worse than the Panthers. What are we talking about? No, there's no shot that this team goes anywhere near the playoffs. They're not even going to come in second place in their division. And that's in a division that's down this year. No, this is horrible. This is awful. Everything that could have gone wrong yesterday for the Dallas Cowboys went wrong and then some, because you had Jerry Jones before the kickoff even happened saying, hey, we made a trade, everybody, but I'm not going to tell you who it was for. And then you find out this morning it's for Logan Wilson. By the way, Logan Wilson, very good football player. I feel horrible for Logan Wilson having to go from the Bengals defense, finally getting traded out of there, and ending up on the Dallas Cowboys defense. I mean, congratulations. You went from 32nd best in the NFL to 31st best in the NFL. Massive upgrade. I really do feel for Logan Wilson on that standpoint.
I just wonder if there's more to come from them, because maybe Jerry Maybe Jerry just thinks, hey, there's enough things I can plug in here that with this offense, which looked terrible last night, that with this offense we can somehow score enough points, get enough stops. I just think I think it's insane what's going on with the Cowboys right now. And maybe I shouldn't be shocked. Nothing should shock me when it comes to the Cowboys, because this has been the mess that it's been for a decade and a half, maybe even longer. But last night was, I mean, wow. I was shocked they got beaten that badly last night.
I'll say this too, Jason, they're beating themselves, right? And with regard to this whole trade situation thing, because you're at a spot if you're the Dallas Cowboys where it's very clear to everyone around the league that it's just not your year. And that happens to teams, especially around the NFL. The thing is, the Cowboys are working this completely incorrectly. If you were doing it properly, you could be trading George Pickens for a lot of draft capital on an expiring contract. You have a lot of pieces that a lot of teams would be interested in, but instead they're going to use all the assets they have and buy talent just to go 8-9, 8-1. They tied a game.
Yeah, they could be a 500 team. There you go. To Jacoby Brissett, and I have to listen. I got to give you some love on this, because you made a comment on the show, I think last week, about the idea of, hey, maybe it should be Jacoby Brissett. And I said, you can't pay Kyler Murray all this money and then go to Jacoby Brissett as your starting quarterback. You just can't. You just can't do it. Then again, we've seen teams like, we've seen various teams do this. and go to the backup. Although in the case of Michael Penix Jr., he's a younger guy. Going away from Kirk Cousins to Michael Penix is a little different. Jacoby Brissett's a veteran guy who, by the way, has always shown he can play the game. Not that you're going to win a Super Bowl with him, but he can play the game. But after watching that performance last night and watching how cohesive that team looked offensively, and you wait in the fourth quarter, is it going to fall apart? And it didn't. I wonder if they have to be thinking about it in Arizona. What you said, kudos to you, the idea of Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah. And I mean, I know a lot of people on the broadcast were talking about it yesterday. They can have fun with that. They're not going to compete in the AFC West. I don't think anyone really thinks they will. The NFC West, yeah. Right. Sorry. The NFC as a conference is much too crowded at the top this year, right? You've got 8 teams with 5 wins in the NFC, I believe. 8 teams with 5 wins in the NFC. The Cardinals now have 3, so their only hope is to win an NFC West where Seattle and LA are going to battle. Yeah, no. Here's the thing about Arizona. This team needs the hardest reset possible, like Saints-esque level of, I don't care if it puts us in cap hell. We got to do whatever we can to just rebuild this thing from the ground, because they're not built to compete in the era in which they find themselves, Jason.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to watch sort of the decision-making processes around the head coach, who had, the whole thing with DeMercado earlier in the year, because then if you decide you're pressing a reset, is Jonathan Gannon the guy you're resetting with? A lot of decisions to be made in Arizona for sure. Nick Ferguson joins us on the other side for more football. We keep it focused on the NFL on this trade deadline day. And again, it's one of those days where it just stinks for us doing the show, because by the time you see the show, the trade deadline will have already taken place. There will be a ton of moves. We will recap them on Wednesday. Matt Verderam, SI, their NFL insider, will join us on the show. But today, we talk with this guy, coming to us from the lounge. Love the lighting. Nick Ferguson hanging out with us on the program today. Former NFL safety, Denver sports media personality, former Denver Bronco. Let me start with the Broncos. I always get to them on the backside, and I feel like I shortchange it. And right now is not a time to be shortchanging this team at 7-2 atop the AFC West. And as much as I have put the fraud label on them and said fraud alert when it comes to the Broncos, they win ugly. They come from behind and beat a Giants team that couldn't sort of figure out how to work their way through the final quarter of a game. Oh, they beat the Texans, but it's after CJ Stroud goes out with a concussion, and all these different things we could keep piling on. Sometimes there are just years in this league where you win this way, where you win ugly. Kansas City last year won a zillion games, and a lot of them were ugly. So I'm not going to necessarily criticize them for the idea of winning ugly. But from your perspective, where this team is right now, pre-trade deadline, again, keeping in mind they may make moves, does it feel to you like this is a team that is not just a playoff team, but a true Super Bowl contender, Nick?
No, they don't. They don't seem like a true Super Bowl contender to me, because when you look at Super Bowl teams of the past, there's certain nuances about all 3 phases of the game that were in place. The Broncos have yet to play a full game where we've seen both the offense, defense, and special teams. Now, all season long, we've seen the defense. Every single time. So much so, JP, I call the Broncos defense freaking MacGyver, because they always show up, right? And they continue to show up. I mean, I know here in Denver, people are excited. Fans and media people alike. And I get it. The Broncos are winning games. They're winning ugly. Yes. But how sustainable is this? You mentioned Kansas City. And because of Kansas City and what they did last year, everyone and every team is saying, well, they did it last year. Why can't we do that here? And especially here in Denver. And the reason why I said, here's the problem. See, your offense has yet to do it against a great defense. You did it against Cincinnati. You did it against the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, you struggled against the Jets. And then when you look at the fact of, okay, well, you're playing against Houston Texans. They have a great defense.
The best defense. Let's just say
it was going to be tough, but we're not seeing the offense show that they can be that type of offense.
But it feels like to me, every time they need a big drive late in the game, Bo Nix finds a way to make plays. He makes enough plays in the fourth quarter in a final drive to get him into field goal range. We saw it against the Giants. Now we've seen it here. We've seen him in various times this year where he's been able to do this. It feels like he has that knack that we often hear about with star quarterbacks. I don't know why it doesn't happen the other three quarters and why it takes getting to a certain point in the game where that does happen. What is your explanation for why Nix has the knack? I like it. Why Nix seems to have the knack in those late game situations, but it doesn't connect for the first three quarters of a game?
Oh, well, I'm glad that you asked because it's real simple, right? This kid has this capabilities. He's been showing them ever since Auburn. He showed them at Oregon. The problem is that the reins are too tight on him, and the coordinator's not allowing him to explore who he naturally is as a player. Just think about it. How did the Broncos end that game? Bo Nix, the Red Sea parted, he ran off to the left side, and he was out. You would have never seen Drew Brees do that. Never, because Drew Brees doesn't have the capabilities. And it's only when the Broncos feel they're in a sense of desperation that we see desperation football, and that's up-tempo. And I'm giving you desperation based on where the Broncos find themselves in the fourth quarter. But Bo has said it himself. Mike McGlinchey said it himself. Even in the game against the Giants, they felt more comfortable and more up-tempo. But the coordinator, that's not how he operates, right? It's slow, it's methodical, the offense, they're not executing, the play calls are not matching. Then all of a sudden, miraculously, in the fourth quarter, when you need it the most, it's like, hey, go do you. Can I remind you of something? The same thing happened when there was another quarterback here in Denver, Colorado, named Russell Wilson.
They're not playing to what you're basically telling me, without maybe telling me, is they're not playing to the strengths of this offense. They're not coaching.
I'm telling you, JP,
okay, all right.
You're not doing it.
You're not coaching to the strengths of the offense. Fine,
exactly.
I get it. One more on the AFC West. We saw the Chiefs go into Buffalo and lose to the Bills. I, as much as I'd like to take a ton away from it, we've seen this story before with Kansas City losing to Buffalo in the regular season. Then we know what happens in the postseason. Do you feel like it's different this time around? Because it feels to me like it is, that this Chiefs defense, while it's okay, is not the juggernaut it once was. We saw what Buffalo was able to do running the football. We saw how uncomfortable they made Patrick Mahomes in this game. Does it feel different to you this time?
No, it does not. It just feels as though we've seen this movie before, right? Maybe that probably wasn't what you expected.
No, it was not.
We've seen the Bills beat Kansas City at home in the regular season. The thing that you have to do, and you put yourself on the map if you're Josh Allen and Buffalo Bills and Sean McDermott, you have to do it when it counts the most, and it's called the postseason. And what we've seen, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, that team is built for the postseason. Now, if you were to say, because the way it could work out again, well, the Bills could host Kansas City. Now, the Bills and Josh Allen prove it at that point. Now, I would say, you know what? The tides are changing. But no, I don't think we're in for an M. Night Shyamalan type of ending, right? But it was great. The Buffaloes won. Josh Allen raised his hand and rode off into the sunset, but I don't trust the Bills' defense. I just don't.
Interesting. I don't necessarily trust that defense either, but at the same time, something's still not connecting with me on this Chiefs thing. And again, they have time to figure it out, and great teams do. So it's going to be fascinating to watch. And then you got the Chargers losing Joe Alt, which is a huge loss for that team. I'm going to hold you over for another segment, so I'll have time to ask you about what this loss of Joe Alt means for the Chargers. And I got to get your thoughts. I already know them in some form on this Jayden Daniels situation. You and I think, disagree in terms of how Dan Quinn handled this and what the path forward is now for this organization when it comes to Dan Quinn as their head coach, based on a decision to keep his quarterback in a blowout game and then that quarterback dislocating his elbow. We're going to let Nick Ferguson weigh in on that and a whole bunch more as we continue on this Tuesday edition of Sports Wrap. All right, let's keep it moving with Nick Ferguson, the former NFL safety. How do people see you on YouTube again? What's it, the Nick Ferg Show?
That's exactly correct.
See?
Ding, 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 ding. JP for 500.
We follow each other on social media. He posts on my stuff. I post on his. We're like two ships passing in the night. I feel like I don't even know you anymore. Denver sports media personality as well, Nick Ferguson, the former Broncos safety, hangs out with us. Real quick on one more on the AFC West, the Joe Alt injury. I mean, I hate to make it sound like one player could mean that much, but when you look at what that offense looks like with and without Joe Alt, what the team's record is with and without Joe Alt, it feels like a crippling blow for a Chargers team that's got a pretty tough schedule in the second half of the season.
Yeah, that team has been decimated by injuries, sort of like the San Francisco 49ers. But in cases like this, you have to find ways to win games. You have to hope that your depth and your youth can actually step up. And what we've seen, JP, is that's not the case for Coach Harbaugh and Justin Herbert. When Alt went out, I mean, when you talk about a guy that was under a lot of duress and still trying to make plays, and he was able to make plays, but I don't know if they're going to be able to sustain this type of long-term injury. And this was a year that it seemed like at the very beginning, that this was going to be Justin Herbert's year. This was going to be the year that he's mentioned in the conversation with Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and Patrick Mahomes. But it's kind of one of these unfortunate things. But I still think Herbert is one hell of a quarterback.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. All right, the Jayden Daniels injury. A lot of people think it's a fireable offense for Dan Quinn to have left him in a blowout game. Hold on, let me get it out first. Easy. Hold your fire. A lot of people think it's a fireable offense to leave your star quarterback in a blowout game. Midway through the fourth quarter, you're down like 38-7. And then he rolls out and dislocates his elbow the way he does. And now he's lost for the season. I can understand some that would say it is a fireable offense for a coach because your job as a coach is to put your players in the best possible position to succeed. I say this all the time. Your job as a head coach, put your players in the best possible position to succeed. And it's hard to argue against the idea that he did not put his players in, and especially your star player, your franchise player, in the best possible position to succeed there. Then he comes out after the game and says, it didn't sound like he had any regret. Then yesterday he comes out and says, oh, no, I screwed up. It's my bad. From how the locker room perceives him, Nick, how Jayden Daniels may even perceive him, and we don't know the answer to that. You're saying 100% he's the guy, you just move on from this.
No, you don't move on for Dan Quinn. This is a knee-jerk reaction because it's easy to say with hindsight being 2020 and understanding what actually happened. And I mean, that's my dog, Dan Quinn. I don't know him personally, but based on what he did yesterday and saying, you know what, that's my fault. That's what a head coach is supposed to do as well, right? Take all the strays and say, well, that was on me. There are a lot of coaches in this league that don't. They pass the buck to someone else. It's always someone else's fault. And to be totally honest, when we look at that situation, did any of us really think that was going to happen? No. Can you get injured in a football game? Yes. That could have happened at any point in the game, but it happened in that particular moment. And the reason I don't have beef with it, because guess what? It was the third quarter, right? Guess who was still in the game, in the blowout game for the Seattle Seahawks? Sam Darnold.
But he's handing the ball off every time, Nick.
No, he was not. He wasn't just handing the ball off. He was throwing the ball. There was one time where he was going down, being pulled down to the ground, and still was throwing the ball in that third quarter. When the third quarter ended, the score was 38-7. So like Coach Quinn said, hey, listen, he was giving his offense one more opportunity to move the ball down the field. Guess what? You didn't hear anything from the fans. There was no booing. People were leaving because how the Washington Commanders were playing. You didn't hear anything from the commentators. Mike Tirico didn't say anything about, well, this is a bad situation to keep him in, right? But it was on that play because they were driving, they were moving the ball down the field. And Dan Quinn said he wanted to give his offense an opportunity to at least score and get confidence. As a former player and a coach, I can dig that. You didn't know that was going to happen. And also, by the way, When we talk about the blowouts, what we should be talking about is that, well, if you're on the losing team, on the winning team, and you're in the blowout, why is your quarterback still in the game? Because Josh Allen against the New York Jets was still in the game, and the score was like 30-6. When you look at, I think it was a couple of games ago, Daniel Jones versus Geno Smith, the score was 40-6. Guess who was still in the game? Both starting quarterbacks. So what are we talking about here?
But are you putting those guys in positions where they could be human piñatas, where they're set up where they're just set up and trying to throw the ball downfield, or are you throwing screens? Or are you handing the ball off? And I'd have to look at every single play to try and discern whether or not that's the case. Let me ask you one more thing before we go. We've talked a lot about the Bengals on this show. And you know how I feel about Joe Flacco and the move for him to go to Cincinnati. And he has done his part and played well. But now you've had a team that's basically scored 80-plus points in the last 2 games and won neither of them. As a former defensive player, how hard is it to be a member of a defense that is as bad as this Bengals defense is? If you're a good player, but just part of a bad overall defensive scheme.
Well, it's very tough because here it is. You're going to have conversations in the building where it's all rah, 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 and you're talking about the team. Once you get in the car with wife and girlfriend or family member, you're going to tell her how they say it like a TI is, because you're going to talk about those players who don't pull their fair share of the weight, guys who are not coming to meetings, guys who are not showing up in practice. And when I say showing up, I mean making plays. And then you fast forward to games, because if I had to tell it straight up, I could show you some of the players on that defensive unit that I'm like, man, they could not play for me because they don't show enough effort, right? That is a problem. And you know what? You and I had a conversation about Joe Flacco. Kudos to Joe Flacco for going out there doing his thing. But here's what it proves. Whether it's Joe Flacco or whether it's Joe Burrow, it doesn't make a difference how many points you score, because your defense is the problem.
Yeah, you could score 38 points with Joe Burrow. You could score 42 with Joe Burrow, and you'd still be losing these games. There's nothing. I mean, there's absolutely nothing they can do. I only have about 25 seconds. What's the solution?
Well, they're surpassed that. They put a lot of money in their offensive star players, and they're not going to have enough money. And if I'm Trey Hendrickson, who signed a 1-year deal, I'm shooting them the deuces, and I'm out. I'm not dealing with this. Like Logan Wilson, I know he was benched, but now he's going to Dallas. I mean, he's probably clapping his hands and saying,
goes from one bad defense to another, though.
Well, yeah, but I would say that, hey, you have a better chance of winning a little more than being in the Bengals.
Nick Ferguson, former NFL safety. Always appreciate you, my friend.
Always appreciate it.
All right, let's keep things moving on this Tuesday. Some more football. Some college basketball coming up in 10 minutes. College basketball started yesterday. Who knew? Who? Good news is nobody lost to the Sisters of the Poor in the top 25. That's the good news. I always scan on that first day to see if there's just one team that gets tripped up by like a Division II opponent or something like that. Didn't happen yesterday. We're okay. So Sam Yarnell, some weekend leftovers from the NFL, Week 9 edition, and a couple of major injuries. We touched on these in Sports Wrap Shorts, which, by the way, if you are not subscribed to the Sports Wrap with Jason Page YouTube channel, you missed, because we talked about these injuries yesterday in an edition of Sports Wrap Shorts, which are going out every day throughout the day, at night, when there's stuff breaking. We are talking about it. Tucker Kraft, this is a huge injury for the Packers when you consider what he has meant to Jordan Love in this offense this year. What a fine rookie he has been. Just a huge loss for that team with a torn ACL, Sam. And again, here on trade deadline day, and again, by the time you watch this show, you may already have the answers to these questions, but are we... if you are Green Bay now, are you looking at the deadline to try and do something to replace what you're going to lose with the loss of Tucker Kraft?
Yeah, I mean, Tucker Kraft obviously has become, over the course of the last couple of years, one of the best tight ends in the National Football League, and was on pace this year for a career high in terms of yardage and receptions. And I mean, you saw what he meant in that Green Bay offense, where the question over the last couple of years has been, are they ever going to find somebody to be the main pass catching guy? It looked like through the first 8 games of the Packers season, all right, we might have that guy now. It might be Tucker Kraft, and maybe he and Jordan Love can just do this. This becomes a very, very sticky situation in Green Bay because now you're looking up at Matthew Golden, who you just used first-round draft capital on, the first pass catcher they've used first-round draft capital on in decades.
Hi, Aaron Rodgers.
And it looks like he's not going to pan out. It looks like you may have been sold a bad bill of goods there. Romeo Doubs cannot stay on the field. Neither can Christian Watson at this point. Jaden Reed has had injury problems too throughout this season. So to me, the question for the Packers now becomes, all right, we're going to find out what Jordan Love is. Are we going to be able to survive the rest of the season with what Jordan Love is and somehow make it into the playoffs with what Jordan Love is? Because I think we all know, based on what we've seen him do in the playoffs, it's probably not going to go well there once they get there. But can they make it at this point, especially after the Kraft exit in this game? You saw the shades of the very bad Jordan Love that we know, right? You saw one of the worst throws that we've seen all season, the dropped interception in the end zone.
Yeah.
This is not great for the Green Bay Packers right now, and a team that had high expectations and has had a couple of units let them down already this year.
Everybody sucks in the playoffs until they don't. So I'll leave that alone for a second. But I think they're a playoff team. I do think they're a playoff team. And there was so much hype on them after the first couple of weeks of the season, and that's kind of obviously died down. And injuries have played a part in some of that as well, in what this team has looked like over the first 9 weeks of the season, Sam. I think they're a playoff team, but it just hasn't come together for me enough to say that I think they're making a deep run. That being said, and we go through this every year in the league, you want to be playing your best football in week 15, 16, 17, not in week 9 and 10. Would you like to be playing great all the way through the season? Of course you would. But at the same time, they do still have some time to put it together before they get to the postseason. But as you mentioned, we were talking about it during the break, the NFC is a beast. The NFC is a beast. And that's the biggest argument, I think, against Green Bay right now is just how good the NFC is as a whole, which is something we haven't really said over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I said earlier in the show, 8 5-win teams. It's not true. 9 5+ win teams in the NFC right now. That makes things a little crazy. But here's why, and I might actually have to put this ticket in because I am now convincing myself more and more that the Green Bay Packers aren't going to make the playoffs. Here's their schedule remaining. Primetime spot against the Eagles. Then they've got the Giants. Okay, you'll probably win that one. Maybe, but the Giants are fun. Vikings, Lions, Bears, at the Broncos, Bears, Ravens, Vikings. That is not an easy schedule. And I'm counting, 5 division games left? Mm-hmm. Things could go very poorly for the Green Bay Packers over the stretch of the season.
Things could go poorly for the Chargers, too, because they lose Joe Alt for the season. And that is an enormous loss for that team. Look at their record with Joe Alt. Look at their record without Joe Alt. It is a vastly different team. At 6-3, you've got Justin Herbert throwing the ball as much as anybody in this league, and now he loses the comfort, that safety blanket that is Joe Alt. And you could see the concern on those sidelines. You could see the concern in the face of Justin Herbert when they knew that this was a serious injury for Joe Alt. So even the Chargers, who are at 6-3, a game behind Denver, while on the surface, everything looks fine, and it looks like they could be a playoff team. You wonder if over the course of the next 9 weeks, now they've got the Steelers, then they got the Jags on the road. They got to travel cross country for that game. Then the Raiders, which is obviously winnable. Then they get the Eagles. Then they get the Chiefs. The schedule is not easy over the second half for this Chargers team. So as much as 6 wins looks good right now, they could wind up being an 8 or a 9 win team that, when we get to the last week of the season, needs a win or help to even make the playoffs, Sam.
I am worried about this from a Chargers perspective, and I don't think that they'll be able to be a team that wins games in the playoffs. But I'm still optimistic about the Chargers making the playoffs, and here's why. They stockpiled wins early. Big wins against the Chiefs and Broncos, right? And they're only going to be dogs 2 more times, maybe 3 this season. I think the Chargers can still make the playoffs, but the Chiefs have got to be counting their lucky stars after this injury.
Cowboys and Raiders are the only times that, maybe I don't know. I'm out of time. We got to go. College basketball next. Odds and Ends wraps it up in 10 minutes. Some NBA in there. We haven't talked about it a lot. This Ja Morant situation in Memphis is interesting. Seems like an untenable situation, for sure. Kurt Heelan on the show tomorrow from Pro Basketball Talk at NBCSports.com. I'm sure we'll get into it with him as well. All right, Sam, college basketball. It just snuck up on me. College basketball is here. We had games last night. We've got, a top 25, men's and women's, a whole bunch of games last night. And as I said earlier in the show, we avoided the monster upset. We avoided the disaster, that night one of the college basketball season where like a Lemoyne beats a Syracuse sort of thing. We avoided that sort of disaster yesterday. St. John's got a win over a couple of Connecticut teams that I love, by the way. University of New Haven and Quinnipiac, both playing, powerhouse teams in UConn and St. John's. And, it didn't go too well for them. But I love the early part of the college basketball season because you get some of these matchups that, these out-of-conference games that you don't typically see. You did have one top 25 actual matchup, Florida and Arizona, and number 13 Arizona knocking off the defending national champs 93-87, Sam. But as college basketball season gets started on both the men's and the women's side, obviously a lot of storylines in play. If you start looking at the odds for a national champion on the men's side, Purdue and Houston, your front runners there, the shortest odds at plus 950. If you are trying to pick a national champion this early in the year, good luck to you. We have a phone number for you. I think it's very challenging. Duke at 11-1, then Kentucky at 14-1. Florida, the defending national champs, now at 17-1, along with Michigan. On the women's side, let's not forget about the ladies. Connecticut plus 210. South Carolina at 3-1, UCLA at 5-1, Texas at plus 950, LSU at 11-1, and then USC at 20-1. What are you looking for early on in the year when it comes to college hoops, Sam?
Yeah, it was a great day on Monday. It was fun
Games
to wake
everywhere.
up and watch. Who are the random teams that played at 8 a.m. on Monday? I can't even remember. It was Bethune-Cookman? I don't remember. Anyway, if you were watching Lemoyne basketball, they got a big win yesterday over SUNY Coble, the State University of New York at Coble.
There you go.
NYCB. Shout out Dan Garang for the Lemoyne basketball team. That guy went off yesterday. No, Arizona, Florida was a very fun game. It was the coming out party for Koa Pete. I think he said after the game, he felt like there were a lot of people in this loaded recruiting class that I have been talking about on this show for a year. He felt like he was the forgotten member of it when you've got your AJ Dybonsa and you've got your Boozer twins. Koa Pete was kind of a name that fell by the wayside, and he showed you in an Arizona uniform why that was shouldn't have been the case yesterday. Don't forget Bryce James on that Arizona team. There are a ton of former NBA players who are making their way to college basketball this year. What I'll say about the national championship thing and what I've heard from people in the sports betting space, because let's be honest, I'm not paying attention to college basketball. I'm barely paying attention to pro basketball at this point in the season. But what I've heard is there is not a lot of clarity. There's a lot more parity than clarity when it comes to college basketball. It seems like all these teams at the top, there isn't a clear team that's better than the others. I've heard a lot of rumblings about Texas Tech being better than people are expecting them to be. St. John's comes into the season with a top 5 ranking, but they've got like the 16th best odds to win the national championship. There's a lot of disparity there between the talent and what we'll actually see come to fruition as this NCAA basketball season rolls on, Jason.
Texas and Duke tonight, by the way, which should be a fun not a top 25 matchup, but Texas is always good. Duke minus 9.5 in that game if you're looking for something to watch on TV tonight. It's a good night. NBA on NBC and Peacock tonight as well if you're looking for some basketball. On the women's side, it is amazing to me that things have sort of run through this cycle. Where it felt like the UConn era had sort of ended. They went forever and a day, in this era of greater parity on the women's side. that the UConn women, it looked like the time had passed, for Gino Auriemma. Then they win a national championship last year, and I thought there was a good chance that Gino would step down, that Gino would decide to walk away after winning a national championship last year, and he didn't. And now all of a sudden you turn around again, and UConn's the favorite on the women's side to win a national championship, Sam. So for all the parity that there is in women's college basketball, you turn around 20 years after it was all about UConn, and 20 years later, it's still all about UConn. And granted, South Carolina will be a part of that conversation, but I find it fascinating that the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah, it really feels like in an era where you see so many namestay flagpole coaches leaving their sports and their universities, Gino Auriemma went through that and then figured it out, right? As we
got
see
through the other
side.
Yeah.
Nick Saban being dominant in it all the way until he leaves. Gino Auriemma chose the different route of, hey, I'm actually going to sit back and learn for a couple of years, and we're not going to be good for a few years. And then we'll come back and we'll be just exactly what you always expected us to be in the UConn Huskies. It is a trend that I think you'll start to see more and more as this college kind of area switches towards professional athleticism. But I don't know. Maybe Dabo's next. Maybe Dabo can do that next.
It is interesting to see how Gino has navigated this era of college basketball now, with it becoming a more pro style in terms of free agency, transfer portals, and all that stuff. South Carolina and UConn, the cream of the crop, though, when you talk about the women's game. Hopefully we get them again in the national championship game. Odds and ends are next. Just about time to put the wraps on this baby for a Tuesday. Don't forget, tomorrow, Kurt Heelan of Pro Basketball Talk at NBCSports.com will drop by. Matt Verderam of SI on the NFL. Post-trade deadline, we get him on to talk about everything that happened and didn't happen. You'll want to make sure to tune in for that. Couple of reminders, if you haven't done so yet, make sure to subscribe to the Sports Wrap with Jason Page podcast. It's available on all your favorite podcasting platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Podcasts, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Odyssey, Amazon, you name it. If there's a podcasting platform, you can listen to this show Monday through Friday. Also, the Sports Wrap with Jason Page YouTube channel. I keep telling you about it. If you're not subscribed yet, go and do it. Sports Wrap shorts are there. You can learn about everything going on in sports. When news breaks, we are on Sports Wrap shorts to talk about it. Yesterday, Dan Quinn had a press conference. Boom, we put it up right away and had some analysis on it. Injury news, we're always there to break that and talk about it as well. And, of course, commentary around the biggest games every day and night. Those are your Sports Wrap shorts. We're also available with Sports Wrap shorts on TikTok, Sports Wrap Jason Page, and on Instagram by that same handle. And without any further delay, ladies and gentlemen, time for some odds and ends. Odds and ends, Sam. We haven't talked about it much, but the Ja Morant situation in Memphis is a mess. He was suspended for a game last week for conduct detrimental, going at his head coach. They went and changed the head coach here because of a lack of connection with the players. And now they've got a head coach in there, and it's a guy that was on the staff. You've got a head coach in there, and he's not connecting with the star of the team in Ja Morant. But it does make you ask the question at some point. And we go through this with superstars on various teams all the time. After a while, you have to ask, is it Ja Morant that's the problem? And there's obviously been numerous problems with Ja Morant in this organization, behavioral issues that have obviously, sparked concerns around that organization. It just seems to me at this point that he's not long for remaining on that roster. But here's the problem. They're not playing him a ton. And if you're looking to trade a guy and try and, suck out some value from whatever he is, you got to play him. So it almost seems counterproductive to me for the organization. He's not going to remain happy and content. He's already talked about the joy of the game being sucked out of him. It sounds like a Jimmy Butler thing again. But it just seems to me like Ja Morant isn't much longer for Memphis. Like it's run its course, Sam.
Memphis is a choice. Feels to me like he's not one that's long for the NBA. I think that there are a lot of people thinking that. I think that there are probably people in front offices thinking that right now. Listen,
makes a ton of money too, Sam. Makes a ton of money.
And it's all guaranteed because that's how the NBA works. We see this happen in sports where every once in a while you'll get these just incredible athletes who are just on a different level. Ja Morant is, when healthy, when not acting up, a top 5 point guard in the league. I don't know. I'm not as on top of basketball right now as I should be, but that feels accurate. And we get these guys sometimes who just can't handle the pressure and the fame. And I think when you talk about the NBA specifically, it's a league that by its nature tends to be a lot more online than all the other leagues. Yeah. I think their players tend to be a little bit more online than the other leagues. When you have Ja Morant, who grew up in Nowheresville, South Carolina, shout out to Sumter County, it may be hard to take that step into superstardom. And there is certainly, and you see this across sport, there is a mental toll that it takes on human beings, right? And I think that the human element of Ja Morant may be struggling, dealing with everything that comes with being an NBA player. And that's not to say that, that shouldn't be taken lightly. That's not to say that it's an easy glitz and glam life making however many $1 million a year. There's a lot that comes with that, and not everybody's built to be able to deal with it. I think Ja Morant is just showing you that he's not built to be able to deal with it in a very unique and flamboyant way.
3-5 on the season are the Memphis Grizzlies. That salary is going to make it very difficult to figure out a situation that works in a trade. Walt Weiss, congratulations. You are the new manager of the Atlanta Braves. And here the reality is, Sam, it doesn't matter. You can bring back, Joe Torre. You can bring back the greatest managers of all time and stick them on the bench for the Atlanta Braves. If they can't keep Ronald Acuna Jr. healthy, it doesn't really matter who you put in that dugout to manage that team.
Yeah, but it's more than Ronald Acuna Jr., and I hate this move. I really don't like this move. Because think about what the Braves are predicated on outside of Acuna. It's not this incredible lineup like the Dodgers have. I mean, sure, they've got Matt Olson, but it's the youth of that pitching staff. It is the prowess with which that pitching staff attacks every series. And there's so much young talent on there between Smith Shawver and Strider. You can go down the list. I don't trust a manager like this to effectively use all of these young pieces in baseball in 2025. This feels like a 2005, 2010 hire. And I think with a window closing on an Atlanta Braves franchise, it's going to set them back.
Lewis Robert, White Sox pick up the option on him for next season, $20 million.
Pay someone, right?
Could be one of the worst contracts in sports. He has really underperformed. It's going to do it for us. Thanks to Nick Ferguson. Thanks to you, Sam Yarnell. Get out and vote today if you are able to do so. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Hi there. I'm Jason Page. You like what you're watching? Subscribe. We've got Sports Wrap shorts on this channel. We've got the show. We've got clips from the show. What else do you have to do? You probably follow a lot of other things that aren't half as exciting as this show is. So what are you waiting for? Click the subscribe button, follow the channel, watch the content. Bye.